Good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise. I'm Ayo Makinde. Hope you've had quite the week. Well, let me believe that be it business, family, economically, professionally, business-wise, there's no word that as businessly, so I love it. You know, that you're finding a way to adjust to this period. I'm just praying with all my heart that every one of us will do well and will come right, bright and shiny at the end of it all. My mind can't but go to our national anthem, the second stanza of the national anthem that says, "O God of creation, direct our noble cause. Guide our leaders right. Help our youths the truth to know. In love and honesty to grow and live in just and true. Great lofty heights attain to build a nation where peace and justice reign." That's our agenda, every single one of us. So how you contribute to it, that's one of the reasons I'm here, so you can get the information that is necessary. Now, government has their role. So do we have our own role as well to watch out for each other and to watch each other? So one of the things that you know we should do is to pay attention to what's happening in our communities, and that's what this individual did in the course of the week. And it was just somewhere around some locality, I think it's Sherry or so, where it was, you know, she just visited a supermarket and saw an individual harassing the cashier, who is there just to provide service. And for whatever reason, shouting on the young lady, and to the point that he got physical, took one of the empty baskets that they used to service, you know, get their purchase, and hit it on the lady. I don't know what the story, what the real issue was. I just saw it on the social media myself, and I'm like, no, this can't be. Gratifyingly, the lady in question ensured the arrest of that assaulting person. And now the hit, it seems like the hit is on her. I mean, everyone is calling her to pull down the post and all of that. I thought the idea of the post was, look, make sure that this fellow doesn't do this thing again. And then here we are, she's being told to pull it down. I don't know, that's her decision. The police is already on it, so maybe the Office of Public Defender in Lagos should also be interested. I don't know how many such things happen all over the nation. It is part of our responsibility. Government has their own role to play. We have our own role to play. And law enforcement agents also have their own role to play. But a situation where law enforcement agents are now the ones quarreling, now that's where I have a problem. I thought they were supposed to be collaborating. That news hasn't really quite completely settled between the army and the LASMA officials, which we understand that it started on a Friday when the LASMA officer was literally, and I saw that he was using some kind of cane to beat this soldier for whatever reason. Your job is to control traffic. If you have any issue with anyone, call the police. They are somewhere around, always around. Even if they are traffic police, they are police. Yours is to ensure that traffic is moving. I don't know, maybe I've not even looked at their laws enough. I mean, of course, we all know what happened after that. The soldiers came out and assaulted another, LASMA officer that took everyone everywhere, got everyone everywhere talking. I don't know, again, how many of such things happen in different parts of the country. It is our nation, and we have to do everything we can. When you put on a uniform, it's not you anymore. It's the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You are serving. So when two servants that are supposed to service me are fighting, I have a problem because now I feel unsafe. So we got our jobs cut out for us, and we have to scale up in whatever it is that we need to do to be better. Don't forget, I mean, we are happy also that all agencies, both agencies in particular, the Army and LASMA, they have agreed that it's something that shouldn't happen, and they hope it never happens again. I am saying amen to that. The same way I said amen to the National Pledge. And because we all have our own jobs cut out for us, Channels Television has taken up the gauntlet to do something. fund it forward so that Nigeria can be better. You know, Channels Television, of course, we know we are an award-winning organization. We decided to do something, a business reality space called Fund It Forward, the one you can see there. It's a competition show designed to nurture the next generation of social enterprises driven by Nigerian youths. That's it right there. We have 12 entrepreneurs set out to compete in 8 rounds. Contestants are between the ages of 20 and 25. And in the last quarter of this year, we are most certainly, beg your pardon, between ages 20 and 35. That's 15-year gap. Amazing. Now, it premieres on Channels Television last quarter of this year. It's our own CSR project. So if you want to be a part of it, I don't even know how you can be a part of it, but if you can, you will just have to find out. But you know, what is interesting about this is that Fund It Forward seeks to answer this question of impact by, are there impact-driven business models that are scalable and sustainable in this country? That's one of the questions that I want to answer with this program. And over the course of 8 intense elimination rounds, every contestant will convince a seasoned judging panel that they possess the rare combination of innovation, heart, and business prowess necessary to succeed. It's amazing. So you need more information. In fact, you can actually register. Yes, if you think you're eligible, you're between ages 20 and 35. That's it right on your face there. Casting.funditforward.tv. If you are eligible, please go ahead and apply. Only if you are genuinely not football age, between 20 and 35 years old. Take a look at this.
When you think of Nigeria, do you think of its potential? Then you might be who we're looking for. We want people in the business of doing good. People with startups or proofs of concept that directly or indirectly take on one or more of Nigeria's social issues. If you want to win a 30 million naira grant, expert mentorship, and access to an exclusive network of business leaders, apply now to be a contestant on our exciting new social enterprise competition show, Fund It Forward. Go to www.funditforward.tv for more details on the show and on how to apply. Fund It Forward, a Channels original series.
You know what I find very interesting about that promo you just saw? Those who are into business, the business of doing good. Now, if you get rich or you scale up your life through such a competition that is about business for doing good, you can't but do good yourself, right? So let's bear that in mind. Encourage anyone, funditforward.tv, that's the website, between ages 20 and 35. They are highly eligible to contest. And guess what? 10 years from now, the 20-year-old is 30. The 35-year-old is what? 45. Just imagine what their lives would have been. That's all you have to do, just encourage them. Even if that's all the good you do for them, encourage them to be a part of it. Now, to our lineup for this morning, let's start with ensuring efficiency in government. That's our first item this morning. And then, you know, we began this conversation about inclusive governance and missed opportunity. Whether or not we still have opportunities to ensure that inclusiveness is a thing, not just at the federal level or at the state, but at the state levels as well. We'll discuss more on that. Then disease control. There's a second joint external evaluation. That's up next, a third on the series. Today is World Humanitarian Day 2023. The theme this year is, you'll find out when we have this discussion. Today, lifestyle. I want to talk about suicide. Why? We've been hearing some a little more frequently these days, and that's very, very disturbing. And then the artist of the week to round off the show today. Should I let any cat out of the bag? Let me just say it's a blast from the past. You're going to enjoy the conversation, so stick with us. So, if you have your cup of cocoa, I've had a cup of cocoa this morning, by the way. I had a little bit of honey in it. If you haven't, go ahead and get it. If yours is cocoa, please, go ahead. I will be right back to begin the show. To stay with us.
When I look up, now commotion. When I look down, now frustration. When I look at my side, now poto. Now so poto. To reach the top, now connection. If you look at person, now stagnation. When I look my side, now poto. Now so poto. Okay. One day, our Naija go good. Now so they talk good. Rise up and take his command. We they see them, we know they blind. We must fight for our right. Anyhow, man must die. This next level, now hot water. Bubble up. Then just to do what you see them with their big belly. Then go they use religion to cause plenty confusion. Sometimes the tribalism, poverty and nepotism. When hunger fire person, you go weak, you no go fit talk again. Today, I say, please go blow. Fire go open there. Masquerade the face go show. Hey, today, I say,
Thank you. The number of ministries, departments, and agencies of government is put by the former DG of the Budget Office at 1,484. About 541 MDAs and about 900 and something corporations or vice versa. Now, that is on the one hand. We've also seen, of course, that many new ones have since been created over time. Now, with such a large number of agencies of government, it's not surprising that a huge chunk of revenue generated by the country now goes into the upkeep of these employees. Some say the Onrosari report should be the reference point for any government desirous of reforming the public service, because in accordance with its terms of reference, it had taken into consideration reports of similar committees or panels set up in the past for just that purpose. In this case, there were the Alison Yaida report of 95 and the Ahmed Joda report of 99. You know, we could go on and on with all of these. For instance, in the area of security, there are many outfits that seem to be doing the same thing, where the police and the Nigerian Civil Security and Civil Defense Corps are already in existence. There's a bill for the establishment of the Nigerian Peace Corps, and so on and so forth. So since many of these establishments are created by law, the input of the National Assembly is inevitable in bringing about a reform of the bureaucracy. The enabling laws should be reviewed to determine those that need repeal or amendments. Perhaps you should even begin to ask the question, how significantly do such things impact on the efficiency of government? Does it help in collaboration? Does it help in their lack of that collaboration? Let's have this conversation this morning with Dr. Monday Ashibogo, who is a policy development expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And we also have Dr. Anthony Chibo Christopher, who is a professor of economics and international business. He joins us in our Abuja studio. He's CEO, African Social Cultural Development Foundation. Thank you for joining us this morning, Prof.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me begin with you, Dr. Chibogo. Is this something that should concern us, this whole conversation about efficiency in government? They know their jobs, they have their enabling laws, but do you think we have a problem of efficiency in government?
Yeah. It's a common factor that we all agree that there's a problem somewhere, and it borders on efficiency and also borders on capacity, deliverables of those agencies. So when you look at that, they go hand in hand. So the challenge here is where we adopt short-term policies for long-term policies. This will breed some form of inefficiencies, and sometimes you use short-term tactics to represent the overall strategy of.
Can you give us an example of that short-term strategy?
Okay, we've always been fond of setting up one ad hoc organization or the other, which over time there's this metamorphosis into an agency. Our military is notorious for it. Our civil service has become notorious for it. So you start from the climate change committee now to a climate change agency. You start from an environmental management agency, then you move it to a ministry, you know, and some organizations were supposed to live a lifestyle and aspire, but we just want to keep it. We just want some of them to stay over a long period of time.
What do you think informs that kind of decision?
Survival.
Survival of who?
of the workers, employees, of course. When you get into a place and it's enriching and rewarding, you want it to become sustainable. So you look for a law that will enable you to stay.
Dr. Chibo Christopher, let me ask you, by way of introduction of this conversation, what do you make of the challenge of efficiency in government? Is it a thing, or because, yes, I mean, the previous government, for instance, the president at the time over and over again talked about the need for the security agencies in particular to collaborate. And we've also seen the same thing among the ministries, departments, and agencies who seem to have overlapping functions and all of those things. But they are created by laws. So where then lies the inefficiency if these are created by law?
Thank you, Ayo. Ayo, for us to, in my opinion, for us to go and handle this matter properly, let's start from the beginning. Efficiency. Efficiency is about accomplishing a task in the most effective and economic manner. Okay, what's the task now? The task now is, or what's the purpose of government? The task now is providing infrastructure to the people, providing good health to the people, providing economic development in the most part to the people. Rule of law, protection of the society, and management of the economy too, okay? So that's what is inefficient. Okay, that is exactly what is inefficient. And what is making it inefficient? Sorry to go directly to the point. We have factors that cause inefficiency in a government. In our case, the number one factor is corruption. Corruption and corruption. Corruption is when sources are allocated to achieve, like we said, achieve a certain aim, achieve a certain goal, and those resources, whether human or money resources, are diverted for personal gain. In that way, nothing even went into the machine for efficiency. Nothing. So no input, no output.
But these are things let me begin. Let me take you up on that. And I know that you have a number of other, things on the list. But let me take you up on that very quickly. And maybe Dr. Chibogu may want to respond to it as well. Now, this whole talk about corruption is so loud and so... We've talked about it for decades. Now, the challenge that I'm having in my head right now is it intractable? There are systems in place that are supposed to ensure such things do not happen. That is why they have what they call internal audits in organizations. There are systems in place to ensure these things do not happen. So, when we talk about corruption, it seems like some kind of something that we can't track, that it's escaping us. It's like some kind of amoebic organism that is moving around, and we've been talking about it for decades. And quite frequently, it's either no one gets arrested or held for it, or whoever gets arrested for it, a number of people say it's just like a slap on the wrist. So if it is so important, such a serious issue, why is it being so escapist, if I can put it that way?
Yes, I agree with you. Corruption is mega important. It's very important. It's the key thing leading to inefficiency. Now, why is it escapist? I'm really sorry to say this, but corruption is our culture right now, or should I say, it's part of the culture. It's so normal in our society that if you're not corrupt, if you're not doing what I could define to be corrupt, then something is wrong with you. And so there is nothing you're going to do that is going to be efficient if you do not tackle the culture of corruption. And that in itself is a mega task. From 5-year-old to 70-year-old, it is a norm to be corrupt. I don't mean it in the cliche sense of it. It is a norm to want to benefit illegally from funds that do not belong to you, but belong to the state.
Okay.
It is a culture. It's in the culture in the office, it's a culture in religious places, a culture in society.
Okay. Well,
so why is it endemic? Why is it escapist? It's because it's when everybody is involved, then it takes a cultural transformation of the mind to get one or two people to go against the norms of culture to change it, and that is the definition of a revolution.
Now, you've just given a task to the next Minister of Information and National Orientation, but we'll come to that one. Do you agree with him about the impact of corruption on efficiency or a lack of it?
Absolutely, I do. I agree with him. You know, it's become a way of life.
But he also, literally said, look, this is not just about one individual. It's something, it's communal, so to speak.
You see, let's look at even poverty, and then we can look at corruption. They have some correlation, right? And over time, people are looking for how they can move away from a particular cluster of lifestyle and migrate. And sometimes they feel that this is how to go about it. Whether you're poor, whether you're rich, you just believe that the endemic way of life, which is corrupt, is okay by you. And it gives also the citizens some sense of entitlement. You get to someone, he says, are you not going to do this for me? You came all this way and you're telling me there's nothing to be given. These days, even kids, when sent on errands, when they come back with your change, they hold back your change and look directly into your eyes. So you see, it's become a norm over time.
Good.
Right.
So bringing up this question, do those who are corrupt, who are not in government, do those who are corrupt know that they are corrupt?
Are we living in isolation? Let's face the fact. Whether you're in government or in private sector, we live in the same community.
No, you don't understand what I'm saying. You just
the knowledge of,
you just said something.
If you grew up, in a violent environment, you are likely to believe that violence is a way of life.
Exactly. So that's the reason I'm asking the question: do those who are performing these corrupt activities, do they know that it is corruption?
Definitely, there are rules and regulations.
So the 5-year-old, for instance, knows that it is corruption to ask to keep the change,
to be gratified, not keeping the change. Keeping the change is another thing. That's theft.
Okay.
But we're talking about a way of life that encourages people to be entitled to act for that which is not theirs, to feel that they need to get gratified for anything that they do,
which is why
outside
I'm asking,
which is
why I'm asking
their
question.
income.
Do they know it is corruption? It's corrupt practice.
Of course. Why wouldn't you know it's corruption? You know that where you work, your salary is 10,000 a month, but you're earning over 60,000 in a week. And you know quite all right that that fund ought to be within the coffers of your organization. And you say you don't know. Are you going to act? You're not going to act out of ignorance. The fact remains that you've seen it as a way of life. You've seen that those who should be gatekeepers and the means of deterrence are also compromised. So there will be a settlement mechanism. Everybody will take part. So in the entire chain of activities, from those who are involved in enforcement, from those who are enforced in legislation, from those who are also involved in making sure that this doesn't happen, everybody is compromised. Okay. So it becomes a way of life. Now, the thing is, as he said, if someone, one or two persons, get into a particular place that creates this reorientation is not just about a ministry. Reorientation starts from those whom we are grooming today to be leaders of tomorrow, to those who already, exist in the system. There must be some mechanism in place. And let me tell you, to displace a particular system that exists or a way of life that exists, there must be some form of compensation that gives way to the other. What will you put in place to compensate for corruption?
Well, that's why you are the policy development expert. We'll come back to that one. But Dr. Chibo Christopher, let me ask you the same question I asked him now. Do the corrupt, from the 5-year-old to the 70-something-year-old that you talked about, does the corrupt know that he or she is corrupt? Especially when, as you also said, both of you have agreed, it has become a way of life.
I like your question. Your question is not an easy question to answer in 3 sentences. I will start with yes and no. That is, do they know they are corrupt? We have to look at it from the demographic point of view now, the age. The people that went to missionary schools that are in their 70s, now 80s, maybe 60-something, of course they do. They know what is right. They know what is wrong. They know they know they're not supposed to be diverting government funds, yet they do it. Now, coming down to those that are about 50 or something, yes, they do. Some time ago, it was said in religious places, we know what is right, we know what is wrong, but it's hard to do what is right. It's the flesh. Sorry to put it that way. The human being. It's easier to do what is wrong. Then you now come, and this is where culture comes. You now come to the teenagers now, the 20-something-year-olds and down. This is the difficult part. Let me repeat your question. Do they know that corruption is wrong? Do they know that they are corrupt? I want to be a bit scientific and say not too much. Why? Because all they have seen, the culture around them that they've seen since they were born, these were people that were born in the 90s and in the 80s, okay? And some in the 2000s. All they have seen is corruption. Everybody around them has been corrupt. Everywhere they went is corrupt. It's the norm. Remember, I said it's the culture. So do they really know this is wrong? Yes, but they also know that this is the way things are done. And this is serious. This is very, very serious.
All right, well, we'll get to the solutions in a bit. We'll get to the solutions. And a revolution
first of the mind.
Yeah.
To change this.
We'll get to the solutions, but run through your list quickly. Just just run through the list, and then maybe we can take them one after the other, and maybe the next 15 minutes or so, we can coast home to some solutions. What are those other things that you see are responsible for inefficiency?
Nepotism. I'll put nepotism under the lack of rule of law. Rule of law. Put rule of law as the title there and then nepotism under. When things cannot happen the way they should happen, when people that deserve something cannot get it, when square pegs are put in round holes, where the best does not get to lead, or to administer, or to manage, there cannot be efficiency. And where there's no efficiency, you are not moving forward. So that's the second one, okay? The other one now is what I would call the lack of capacity, the lack of capacity, where because of number two now, number two and number one, no resources is put into training the next generation in the capacity that is needed for them to actually excel and make government efficient.
Okay.
We are in the fourth industrial revolution now. Who is talking about that here?
Okay.
Where you go? We are here now. We are here now,
yeah.
and we are not doing what it's going to take this country to move forward in the next 5 years.
Well, incidentally, we have a new set of
Why? Because
now.
The capacity.
Yeah, we have a new set of ministers now. Let's just see. But Dr. Shibogu, you've seen his list: corruption, rule of law / nepotism, and lack of capacity. You also mentioned that earlier. In all of these mix, where do we put the civil service? Because that's the engine of governance or government.
Well, I share in his views, but tragically, democracy sometimes do not churn out competent hands. It's very emotional and sentimental. And the tragedy of our civil service is that we've weaponized religion and ethnicity. So these are two major tools that have been used to drive our civil service today, religion and ethnicity. And sadly, competence is not an issue that comes on the front burner, except in some MDAs, where there's an established law. And even with that, having an established law, nepotism also comes to play. So you bring your kinsman or you bring someone you feel that's appropriate for that. After all, you say, okay, this is a health agency. We just send one doctor there who goes there and becomes a clownish character and deviates from the entire objective and his calling as a medical doctor. So, but the thing is, the weaponization of ethnic and religious affiliations in our civil service has become one of the most dangerous tools today. That you can agree with me that is one of the things that have created an uneven balance. It has affected the decisions to take competence to the forerunner. Now, another thing again you should look at is what determines a civil service of a country. It's its objective to achieve its developmental goals. Countries that take seriously to development objectives have very enriched civil service. It's not an all-commerce place. It's a place that speaks to competence.
Okay.
So they allow politicians to become ministers. They allow politicians to become heads of agencies. But beneath them are persons who will frame the policies,
so the way
who will drive these policies. And they are also, to some extent, giving certain kinds of incentives that isolate them from being in competition with the private sector.
Okay, so now let me come to the solutions that you wanted to get to the other time. How do we begin to redress this? How do we strengthen the next set of ministers to ensure that they do well for Nigeria and for Nigerians?
I mean, can't strengthen ministers.
Okay.
What are you going to strengthen about someone
I'm talking about the ministries. No. I'm talking about the ministries because they are heading it. They're the political heads. And as you said, they are the ones who are coming with the policies. So what kind of policies and how should those policies be engineered?
They will be inaugurated this by next week.
Yes.
But the question is, what's the policy framework for each agency? We've seen what the guys in finance have been doing. Perhaps we may have to take a cue with what they sent as a policy document in the past. But there are some gaps. It's not just enough to have a very beautiful document. It's having the team to work with you.
I'm talking about the ensuring efficiency when they come into office.
That's not going to happen.
There will be no efficiency?
Why do you expect a politician to be efficient?
You just talked about the civil service.
No, the civil servants can be efficient.
That's the point.
We can work towards making the civil service very efficient. So how do we
do that?
The politician has several considerations to take into place. He has an election to meet up in coming years. He has his constituency to deal with. He has the affiliations that
Dr. Shibogu, how do we solve the problem of efficiency, especially with the engine of government, which is the civil service?
Stop adopting short-term policies for long-term policies. You know, stop all these ad hoc measures. Okay, let's give an example. The Economic Council finished a meeting, right, and deployed trucks of rice to states. I think a truck of rice is about 600 bags. So if you give a truck 5 trucks, you're talking about 3,000 bags of rice, 50 kg bags, right? And you're going to give it to vulnerable homes. And you expect that bag of rice to last for how long?
over time, people would adopt that palliative to become an agency of its own. Now, we've had 5 billion coming to each state. Are the states actually capable of matching that grant with another 5 billion? And if they do, the distribution, how transparent will it be? We had the stories of how the conditional tax transfer happened in the last administration.
What would have been a long-term approach to this that will still serve short-term purposes?
No, you see, it's okay to have ad hoc measures. But over time, it becomes something that we always want to continue. That's how the subsidy started.
Okay.
You know, and we will continue with the palliatives. And, you know, you need to endear yourself as a leader to your people. You must also reflect your policies on their lifestyles. Now, 3,000 bags of rice arrives in state. How do you think it will be distributed?
So it's a short-term, you think it's a short-term solution that may be sustained and will also invoke...
I can tell you for free that most states will continue with this policy.
All right, Dr. Chibo Christopher, how do we begin to tinker with our systems to ensure sustainable efficiency in governance?
It looks, with the naked eye, impossible, but it's not impossible. Recent research we conducted in my school, in my university, showed that in dire situations like this, especially in African countries, the best thing to do was to adopt policies and implementation of those policies that enforce the goals. Go straight and enforce the goals. Because the issue now, in many cases, and also in Nigeria, is not that we don't have on paper what is the right thing to be done. The issue is that the implementation process is scuffled and, excuse my English, messed up. So, if we have a group of people with power that are enforcing the goals, what are the goals, if you would, the objectives of this policy? And go and enforce them. It's harder than it's easier to say it than it is to implement it, because you now come, if you're going to enforce the goals, then you come with what we call brick wall societal and cultural barriers, because you find out that, hey, you're in an office and you're trying to enforce the goals of your policies, and all of a sudden you find out that 50 or 60 people, 60% of the people in the office don't really have the skills that they should have to be where they are.
But Dr. Chibo Christopher,
so where do you go?
Yeah. Where do you go
with that?
What you've raised now, how do they, if you can hear me, how do these issues you just raised now, how do they deal with corruption, nepotism, and the third item that you mentioned the other time? How do these issues that you've raised, how do they address corruption, nepotism, and capacity?
I really didn't say anything yet about addressing them, but now that you ask, you see, I'm sorry again to say the only way to address the inefficiencies or corruption is to address them. I speak figuratively. When a society has decided on its own that enough is enough and things have to move on, first of all, they have to come to the understanding that the reason we are where we are is because things are not working and things are efficient. Then the reason why things are efficient is because, hey, we're corrupt, we're nepotic, and we are not overall given any vision.
Do you see?
So you know what? A society has to come. Yeah. A society has to come to its own moral decisions before it can move forward.
Yes. Do you see the anti-corruption agencies efficient enough to deal with the problem of corruption?
No.
Okay. Dr. Chibo.
No.
Do you?
No.
Yeah.
What are you guys talking about? We don't have any hope? Is that what you guys are saying?
No, we're not saying we don't have any hope. But you see, let's face facts. These agencies don't live in isolation. You know, they are not isolated in one island somewhere where everything is perfect, right? They are all products of the same society we come out from. the young men and women who work there. You see, I said one thing about the displacement of incentives. Listen, if corruption should fetch me ₦1 billion a month, right? And you want us to move away from ₦1 billion a month and that money should go into state coffers, and there's an incentive that keeps me stable, and I have guaranteed returns of survival as an individual, I will be willing to go that route with you. And I would simply say this. Look at our civil service. It's actually a mockery. Let's give an example of Abuja. A level 8 officer, do you think a level 8 officer can afford any flat from area 1 to area 11 in Garki, or from zone 1 to 7 in Wuse, or Wuse 2? You can't. But you will find some of them living there. So the enumeration of the civil service in itself do not match with the reality of the society or the town they stay. So if you are asking someone to deviate from looking for other sources of income where he sees it as a way of life now, you must also create the incentives to push them away from that system.
That is the only solution.
The system also do not give guarantees for any service delivered. So I work today. I'm not assured that if I have a contract with government and it says 90 days delivery, on the 90th day I'll be paid. So what do? I would inflate my invoice to accommodate the losses I would incur for the period of time government deems it fit to pay me. And so these are you see, you need to. I do once understand. A system gives guarantees for performance, a system, because you start from the public sector, it will have a ripple effect on the private sector. Okay. Now, if governments honor contracts, governments honor payments of services for deliveries, rewards competence for people to live within a particular means of life. Now, that's one of the things you could put in place. But the issue is, do you have resources that can match that? Because we've always lived with the mentality that our natural resources are inexhaustible. And we also forget that before oil came, there was coal. We had Stone Age. The stones have not gone, but it's not relevant. Well,
gentlemen, we have to coast home. We have just less than 1 minute to conclude on this one. So, Dr. Chibo Christopher, I'm pretty sure you're going to say you agree with Dr. Ashibogwu here, but what will be your last words on this in ensuring that we have sustainable efficiency in governance?
Listen, let us understand in our country that we have big problems. And if we continue in the trajectory we are in now, and I'm talking not only of Nigeria, the whole black African race will end up being enslaved in the next 40 years. There's a problem, and the problem is big, and it borders on our position as part of the human race. So while we're talking about local issues of inefficiency and corruption, while we are doing that, the world is going by. The world is going by. By the time, if we ever come out of this, we'll find out that we are the whole black race, because Nigeria represents a big percentage of that, is once again behind. So the society must decide that things must change. Absolutely. When the society really decides that things must change, it will change.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony Chibo Christopher. Thank you so much for your time this morning, as well as Dr. Monday Ashibogwu, who is a professor, policy development expert. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Well, it sounds like, to me, gentlemen, that you have spoken about a very important thing, which is to raise the next generation of leaders. It's about time we got to work. We're back right after now.
They're still heavy on my mind tonight. The pain is deep inside, but I still want to
this what you really want to do?
Yes, Dad. That's what I've been trying to show you.
Fight for your dreams the advanced way with Glow LTE Advanced. The power of 3 data networks in one. Get a Glow SIM or dial *301#.
The Duchess International Hospital caters to every aspect of the family's health needs. A one-stop shop for maternity and child health services, emergency medicine and critical care, medical and surgical subspecialties, dental and eye care, and a range of other subspecialties and services, all available at a single location right here in the heart of Ikeja. And it really doesn't matter if you're paying out of pocket using your HMO or private insurance. We focus completely on providing that world-class affordable healthcare for all the family at all times.
I keep trying him. I think I'm desperate.
Is this dress even fine?
What if he doesn't like me?
He's here. I mistake. Joe? Same Joe.
Same Joe, minor differences. Same Joe, minor differences? Don't even think about judging Joe, because you're probably just like him. Why is the name on your business bank account Ahmed Aminu and not your business name? Same business, different name, right? Stop impersonating your business and get an account in your business name with MoneyPoint.
Whatever it takes to make sure you have a business account opened in your business name, we'll do it as your sure banker.
Seriously, trouble. Is this not the same name?
Open a bank account in your business name with MoneyPoint.
Well, our next conversation is about inclusive governance, and we've been asking that question. Is it a missed opportunity already, or it is something that we still have hope of addressing? Now, don't forget that promoting inclusivity and diversity, appointing persons with disabilities to leadership roles in government agencies is intended to raise awareness, create public discourse, and urge the President of Nigeria to act in appointing qualified persons with disability to leadership roles in government agencies. So, question then is, what challenges might individuals with disabilities face when seeking leadership positions, and how can these obstacles be overcome? We should have two gentlemen join us this morning. Paul James is Program Manager, Election, Yaga Africa, as well as Mr. Isiaku Adamu, who is National Secretary, Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities, and both of them join us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. In our Abuja studio, let me ask you, let's begin this conversation from where you sit. What do you think it's a missed opportunity?
No, it can never be a mixed opportunity. Rather, I think a perfect opportunity for the government to do some of the things that they promised during their campaign, because this is a government whose campaign was anchored on ensuring inclusivity or participation of different strata of the society. Now that the opportunity is there, as far as we can see, as far as appointments are concerned, I think it is the time that the government begin to do what is right by not only the disability community, but also by every strata of the society. We have seen some high-level appointment happen already, especially that of the ministers. And so it begs the question, is this truly what we have aspired to see from the word go? Because, I mean, you got over 48 persons that were nominated for the position of the minister. So far, about 45 confirmations have been made. We still have 3 more to go. Whether the president intends to complete those 3, we don't know yet. But we thought, so far from what we have seen, there hasn't been that. There hasn't been that high level of appointment for persons with disability. If the president intends to complete the remaining 3, perhaps this is a chance, I think, the moment that the president needs to show, that, the government really want to be inclusive by giving a chance to persons with disability. Oftentimes, when you hear the conversation around persons with disability comes up, it comes from the place of, most times, people feel like doing this community a favor. It is not. I think we have to approach it from a right-based approach. These are Nigerians, like every one of us, that should enjoy all the inalienable rights that we have in our Constitution, the right to freedom of association, the right to freedom of assembly, the right for participation, unhindered participation, so long as they fulfill all the requirements of the law. If you, from the conversation so far, as facilitated by the TAF Africa Foundation, the idea is for persons with disability that are qualified. The underlying word there is qualified, that they should be given they should be given the opportunity to participate. There have been a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations, especially civil society organizations like the TAF Foundation, that have been helping to prepare these persons with disability for this leadership position. Perhaps it is time, like I said, that the government should do what is right by that community.
But another question that I would want to put to you, I mean, thankfully you are, you've worked with elections or worked on elections for long enough. So in the build-up to the elections, in the entire electoral practice in our democracy, spectrum in our democracy, what has been the body language of Nigeria? By Nigeria, let me decrypt to political parties, in the political process, in the election process, the attitude of Nigerians generally to persons living with disabilities. What has been the attitude? What has been the inclusiveness generated from these sectors?
I think from where I sit and the observation so far, the approach has always been from the point of doing that community a favor. You hear so much of noise from these stakeholders about how they want to mainstream participation, but when it comes to the participation proper, you don't see that on board. Perhaps because also the environment is not defined, it's not codified in a manner that will also ensure this participation. You rightly you pointed the political parties. If you think about how campaigns are conducted in this country, oftentimes they are conducted in a very hostile environment that to some extent will even put fear in even able-bodied people, not to talk about persons with some form of disability. But I don't think that should also limit the participation. There are different levels of engagement, different levels of participation, if you like, for these persons with disability. You can put them at the forefront. You can put them on posters for political parties. In leadership role, they will deliver. We've seen that in the past, that people have even made attempts. But of course, because of the kind of mindset we have towards this community, we don't push it to fruition. I know even in Abuja here in the FCT, We know some prominent names of persons with disability that have also made attempt to be on the ballot. I mean, that have also carried out extensive campaigns around Abuja, but they never even got any form of recognition even from their own community. So you often wonder whether we're paying lip services to this. For civil society organizations, you see all sort of intervention before the election. People even tracking the participation of persons with disability as conducted, as encouraged by other groups like even the election management body, like political parties and the like. But you also begin to wonder, to what extent are this civil society also conscious or deliberate in the engagement of the disability community? But we have seen deliberate efforts also for some observer groups, for instance, to push the ideas of these persons with disability forward, to bring them in as observers. We have seen groups like the Inclusive Friends Association, for instance, that have in the past encouraged the disability community to serve as observers. They can come with their own aid, go around polling stations with, the sort of opportunities that is provided by the IFA for them to meaningfully participate. But what has been the inhibition oftentimes is where you come to even voting on election day. Sometimes the way the polling stations or polling units are structured, they are not in a manner that will encourage this participation. Some polling units will have to cross gutters to access them. Some polling units are placed in high up location where persons with disability may not be able to access.
Pardon me for butting in very quickly, if you can do this in about 10 seconds. Do you see this mainstreaming or a lack of it as a major hindrance in inclusive governance for people living with disabilities?
Yeah, I think we still have that challenge, especially the stigmatization that is associated with that. Okay. But we need to correct that mindset, because sincerely, when you come close to engaging with them, I've interacted with them at different levels, you realize they are very wonderful people to associate with, people with bright ideas, with great minds that, if you take them on board, I am sure, whoever will want to work with them will not regret it, will not regret why they will want to bring them close. All right. It's just to provide that opportunity.
Pardon me, Mr. James. Let me add to this conversation. Jacob Pele, he's since joined us. We were unable to reach Ishaku Damo. But Jacob Pele joins us this morning. He is founder and CEO of TAF Africa. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm pretty sure you've been listening to a bit of the discussion we're having, or probably you caught a little bit of it. The challenge is still that of mainstreaming. Do you see that as significant to the challenge, the issue we are having with inclusive governance for people living with disabilities?
Well, thank you, Ayo, and thank you for, despite all the challenges, you guys were able to have me this morning to represent a friend of mine, Ishaku, that would have joined. Yes, I think the issue is when the people who want to implement mainstreaming of persons with disability, and I'm not a very good fan of using the word mainstreaming, but inclusion, because inclusion presents a larger picture. The issue is when people are paying lip service to the issue of inclusion, when people are not, they don't have the political will, when there is non-availability of policies, the right policies and framework to drive the process. So you have a situation where
all right. Well, yeah, we'll come back to you. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that connection better, Mr. Pele. Let me come back to you, Mr. James. So here we are now. Inclusiveness is a challenge that we've been talking about for quite a while. Inclusiveness for young people, we're still struggling with it. I guess we're getting there gradually. Inclusiveness for women, we're getting there gradually. What do you think has been the shortfall, well, the reason for the shortfall in inclusive governance with people living with disabilities?
I think it's this notion sometimes from some political class that they own this space, and so they get to dictate even what happened in this space. Not also knowing that governance should actually be a bottom top and not top to bottom. So like Jake had alluded earlier, the challenge oftentimes is the lip service. I've also mentioned that earlier. You see all of this during campaign. These are all done sometimes to stir up conversation, to get people interested in it, to get votes from voters especially. But when the time comes for the main engagement, you neglect the same community that you had made commitment, you had made promises to engage. I think we need to institutionalize some of these processes. We need to, not also want to go the route of saying mainstream, because to even mention that the issue about inclusivity, it means the challenge still exists, and then we just need to see how we could have that political will to ensure that we overcome those challenges. So what is to be done? I think first, of course, is to go back to the drawing board. I begin to think about our legal processes, the legal instrument, for instance. Maybe if we need to make this a matter of law, to say going forward, for instance, you want to see that a certain position, I don't want people to look at it from the position of tokenism, but then to say, since we have tried every route that we thought should make this possible and it's not happening, maybe we need to make it a matter of the law this time and say, okay, we have to reserve certain percentage for this community, and every strata of the society, the government, civil society, and the likes, must make it a deliberate effort to see that we include them, we give them meaningful participation in governance. And then again, just to buttress the point that it's not just giving them for the sake of giving them, but that they are rightfully qualified to do that. If at the point of appointment we don't find persons from that community that have the requisite experience that is needed for that position, perhaps we may overlook it for that moment until we're also able to groom them to the level that they're able to take up that position. But then again, I will continue to emphasize that we should continue to provide the avenue, the opportunity for them, not only to participate, but to also be grooming them and making them ready, so that by the time those positions are available for them, they'll be able to take on and be able to deliver as expected.
Well, Mr. James, it also raises another question. I mean, what you just said now just raises this other question. Are there metrics that we can use to measure the success of efforts that can promote inclusivity and diversity in government agencies across board?
Yeah, I think we will start looking at it even from the recent effort to ensure their meaningful participation in the electoral processes. If you recall, last year the President signed into law the new Electoral Act, where we have Section 52, I think, that now mandates INEC to do everything possible to ensure the participation of persons with disability in the electoral processes. I think it's a good start. Before now, that aspect of the law is so loose that INEC may decide to or not to. And so it's to begin to track those metrics, like you mentioned, I'll see to what degree, to what level did that happen. We got over 34 or 35 million Nigerians as persons with disabilities. So I think it's first a good step that there are available data, available statistics to show that they exist. Now, I mean, these are statistics that can also be disaggregated by their gender and also the type of disability. I think it's to begin to approach them now by, one, the kind of disability and what should be done to help them in their own, to integrate them meaningfully into the society. And then on the part of the agencies of government to also ensure, earlier I had alluded to the fact that even places of voting, for instance, are still a challenge. Okay. Elections, I mean, we just came out of general election. We have about 3 or more years ahead of us to the 2027 election. If it is to begin to reposition polling units in a manner that will allow their participation, I think this is the right time to start. Okay. If you think about also how some of our buildings are structures. They don't have even ramps that can support persons with disability. For any meaningful organization, for any meaningful government that wants to encourage that.
Pardon me, I had thought that we already crossed that Rubicon of access facilities for people with disabilities. But let me see if we have Mr. Pele back. Mr. Pele, let's hope that the connection is better now. So we have had this conversation. This is the third in the series, if memory serves me right. So how can we champion this any further? What other efforts can be made to at least compel, not the right word to use at this, but at least to compel attention to inclusivity and diversity, which factors in people with disabilities in government at various levels, federal, state, or local?
Ayo, I heard you clearly. I think my colleague had enumerated many of the factors that can be used as indices, but I think the issue of data comes to mind. Having empirical data disaggregated by types. I think also, I don't know sometimes if government wants to push us to the point of maybe protests, to the point of taking them to court, to the point of becoming a little bit but there's a deliberate effort by government to sort of discourage us and also frustrate us, and it's becoming alarming. I thought with the experience of the current president that he will, by all means, look in our direction, but it appears that there's a deliberate effort either by him or by the people around him not to even mind whatever we say or do. And that is appalling and very disturbing, and I pray that that will not be the case going forward. I really don't care who they work with. I know that they are political. They can decide to work with anybody in their camp who is a person with disability. And like I always say that I don't care who gets this job done as long as the job is done. So there is that deliberate effort on the part of this present administration not to give ears to all of our advocacy, not to be mindful of whatever and however we feel. And it's unfortunate because, it's more unfortunate because I know some people that I can call friends who are in this government, the chief of staff. I know the effort he made as a speaker to be inclusive. I know many times, many of his events he supported, and many of them he went out beyond to ensure that it has that color of inclusivity.
Well, Mr. Pele, let me assume that he's still working on those things, just to ensure that this whole campaign is on. But just this one last question for you. Are there strategies? I mean, Paul James spoke the other time about maybe there is a need to enact certain laws that will compel ministries, departments, and agencies, even the federal government at the very top level of the president or presidency, to factor in people living with disabilities. What strategies do you think government or government agencies can implement to address this bias and discrimination during the selection process?
Well, the one is they need to keep working with the OPDs that truly understands the issue around inclusivity and that are selfless in terms of service to the community. Number two, there's a need to collaborate and come out with a national policy on inclusion. And when I mean that, it has to be holistic. Inclusion of women, inclusion of youth, inclusion of persons with disability, inclusion of other emerging communities that will be further left behind. So there needs to be a clear-cut, precise, crystal clear national policy on inclusion. Okay. The second thing is the government needs to be honest and deliberate in terms of sourcing for resources. For instance, INEC wanted to do a bit of an inclusion that she said she wanted to do. There was a deliberate, I must be honest to say that, they deliberately wanted to do it. But however, they didn't have the resources. So there has to be a designated budget to drive inclusion. There has to be the development partners' participation in the drive for inclusion.
It's a long walk, Mr. Pele. There's no doubt about it. It's a long, walk. And I mean, if I recall very well, what efforts you have made over the years, to try to bring us to where we are today, I know that it's been quite a journey. And we're most certainly making progress. A missed opportunity, Mr. Paul James says it is not. Well, we have to hang this conversation here because we're completely out of time. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Jacob Pele is CEO and founder of TAF Africa. We've also had the pleasure of Mr. Paul James. Paul James, any last words? 10, 15 seconds? Okay, but unfortunately we couldn't quite hear you. Sincere apologies about that. Paul James is Program Manager, Election, Yiaga Africa. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So we're back right after now to talk about another one. We've had a second joint external evaluation in disease control. What does that mean? After now. Next, we want to talk about that, disease control. You see, there is greater globalization, scientific innovations, and technological advances of the 21st century in particular, and the world as a result and its inhabitants are more interconnected than ever before. Well, this is good, right? It's good for trade, it's good for exchange of products, goods and services. It has also come with increasing challenges to national, regional, and global health security. Now, at the end of a 5-day rigorous exercise, which is likely to include plenary sessions, document review, and site visits around the country, scores will be allocated to Nigeria using the JEE 3.0 tool to determine the country's preparedness and response capabilities towards national, regional, and global public health events. Nigeria's second joint external evaluation is scheduled to take place from the 14th to the 18th of August 2023. And of course, you know that it was scheduled, I meant to say. But let's have this conversation this morning with Dr. Ifede Adetifa, who is the Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Doc.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let me ask you this rather interesting question. How has it been being the General Officer commanding control disease in Nigeria?
I wouldn't quite put what I do in the way you've described it, but I understand what you're asking. It has been a privilege and an honor for me to be given the opportunity to serve my country in this capacity. But it has been challenging. It has been interesting in equal measure as well. And it has been basically like being on a roller coaster. There's always something going on and something to be concerned about. So sometimes it's difficult to find some period of peace or calm in between disease outbreaks or in between what you need to do to prepare for the next anticipated outbreak. But overall, I took this job because of the challenge and for the opportunity to help make a difference in my country. And I still feel the same way about the reasons for which I took this position.
Well, the nation most certainly appreciates your commitment and your sacrifices. But let's talk about this joint external evaluation in Nigeria. What does it mean, really? Give us a background.
Okay, so the Nigeria signed up to something called the International Health Regulations. And you may have heard of IHR 2005. Basically, the IHR or International Health Regulations are a legal framework that gives guidance on what member states of the WHO are supposed to implement or to do, or the standards they are supposed to meet, so as to achieve a resilient health system and have a robust national health security that not only assures the security of the population that the government serves, but also protects regional and global health security. So now those regulations, in terms of spelling out obligations which countries have to meet, also provide a means of monitoring the compliance of countries in meeting those obligations. And there are several ways by which this is done. And one of them is what is called the joint external evaluation. The joint external evaluation measures national status and progress in achieving IHR core capacities. And more importantly, it allows countries to identify the most urgent capacity building needs within their health system or health security system, and then informs the development and the revision of national action plans for health security, because it basically allows you to identify your priorities to act on in order to build up capacity in the thematic areas that are looked at, which typically are prevent, to detect, and to respond to public health challenges or health security challenges. And then there's a fourth thematic area that looks at other threats, for example, radiation events or chemical events and the like. Back to you.
Okay. Well, interesting. Then, would you say that we have made significant progress, as a country? In what ways have we made progress? In what ways have we been challenged? I'm actually concerned more because when we talk about Nigeria, we're essentially talking about the various federating units in the country. So, in what ways have we scaled up? In what ways have we challenged? Part this, conversation about JEE.
Well, I think Nigeria has made progress so far. The achieving or assuring national health security is a journey, not something that happens overnight. So just like you don't expect a tree to grow overnight, you don't expect any country to achieve all national health security goals overnight. And I think we all, as the entire world, received a rude awakening, or we were humbled by the COVID-19 pandemic that showed that even those countries that were thought to be doing very well in terms of what they have put in place for health security were still vulnerable to public health threats like a large outbreak or like the pandemic. So Nigeria's journey in terms of the health security has been a progressive one. Obviously, in 2005, Nigeria decided to sign up for the adoption of the international health regulations. In 2017, we conducted the first external joint evaluation exercise. Following that and the gaps that were identified, we developed a national action plan for health security for the period 2018 to 2023. 2 years after the first joint external evaluation, we conducted a mid-term JEE just to calibrate implementation and to see if we needed any further tweaks. And it's instrumental that JEE was done just before COVID really broke in many parts in Nigeria and in many parts of Africa. And the outcome for that also helped us in terms of preparing for the COVID response. And now, 5 years later, after the National Action Plan for Health Security was developed, we have taken the option of evaluating the progress so far or the lack thereof with a view of providing a means or arriving at a prescription that would allow us to either self-calibrate or indeed identify priorities for us to implement over the next 5 years. And it comes at an opportune moment because we've had a transition in government. We have new Ministry of Health or other ministries' leadership coming in next week. And what they are going to get a list of priority areas that can be aligned with government objectives for health to assure our health security. Now, for those that tend to look for, who might consider this an exam and want to look at whether people scored F9 or credits or distinctions, in 2017, the JEE score. So I should explain that what the JEE does is that it looks at 56 indicators in 19 technical areas, and it assesses each of these for whether there is no capacity, which is the worst score, whether there is limited capacity, which is number 2, whether we have developed capacity, which is 3, and whether there's demonstrated capacity, which is 4, and the highest score is given when for the particular area that is being looked at or indicator, it is concluded that there is sustained capacity. So when the first JE was done in 2017, we scored 39%, which basically, and as brutally honest as that was in terms of feedback, was a failing grade in terms of the country not being ready to respond to health security threats. I'm pleased to announce that in 2023, at the end of this week, when the JE was concluded, our score is now 54%, which means we now have a passing grade in all thematic areas and in almost all indicators that were assessed. As well. So this is not the NCDC's result. This is the result of the cumulative investment by government at national and subnational levels, by partners in the health security space. And I think that it is worthy of celebration, given where we have come from, but also means that it's not time to be complacent, that we need now to look at what needs to be done to move this towards a more, for want of a better description, distinction type grid.
Okay, because I was actually going to ask you, how we fared in what our grades are in 2023. I'm glad that we passed. At least there is no, I mean, it's a good one. But I mean, you didn't mention that in 2019, for instance, we scored 46%, and now we have found ourselves scoring above 50%. But then it only begs the question of, whether or not you think we are moving a little too slowly up the ladder. So the question that I would like to ask is are we lacking the buy-in of high-level officials of government, or even the buy-in of the people themselves? Where are we lacking buy-in, and how important do you think it is?
Well, I think the important thing is to remind us that health security, even if there's health in it, is not just the concern of the ministries of health or health authorities at national and state level. Health security requires all of government and all of people participation, collaboration, and attention. Okay, so this is why a significant effort needs to go into trying to raise the scores from one level to the other. It's not just the health sector that is assessed. It's not just the NCDC that is assessed. It's not just states that are assessed. And the assessment is for national capability, which means even if everything is okay, for example, in Abuja at national level, but it is not at subnational level, we will be ranked very low. Okay, so in terms of buying, as I've said, this requires an all-of-government approach, requires an all-of-people approach. And there is all that this points out is that we still have some way to travel in terms of all of the collaborative work and commitment that is required to assure our health security. So we need to do more work in terms of coordination between all of the ministries, departments, and agencies that are required to coordinate and collaborate in terms of health security. We need, as the NCDC has identified and has been saying, we need to invest in subnational strengthening, because we will only be as strong as our weakest link. So it doesn't matter if one state, two states are centers of excellence, we will still be susceptible to threats if there are other states that are doing poorly. So what we expect to do is to continue to work on commitment by all who need to be involved. Government has historically put in more money into health security than they've ever done before, which is commendable. That needs to continue, and that investment needs to even increase further. We need subnational strengthening. We're already focusing on this, but even more will need to be done in this space. And I think that everybody, especially in the aftermath of COVID-19, and recognizing that a health threat is a national security threat and economic threat, recognition that everything that happens, even in the environment, with animals, are all likely to threaten human health. I think we are preaching to the converted here. We just need to remind people to match their words with actions, and then we need to bring to bear more investments. For example, you know, the challenges we have with healthcare worker attrition brought us down in terms of health workforce. So it's just to highlight that many things that are going on across the country in various sectors related to health security that are not immediately apparent to us as connected to health also affect our JE scores. For example, even financing.
My apologies. Interestingly, I mean, quite some work has been done since 2005, you know, from the chart that we saw earlier, and the milestones, you know, are also there for all to see. But I find one of the thematic areas, I mean, look at this chart, for instance, all through from 2005 down until 2020, on to 2023, the journey so far, the JEE milestones of Nigeria are quite there for all to see. But then there's one that I find very interesting. When you looked at the thematic areas, in 2017, under the thematic area of prevention, we scored 39%, but in 2023, we scored 50%. And I feel, permit me, I mean, you know, help me understand if where I'm getting it wrong. This has to do a lot more with the people, you know, in preventing this. Malaria, for instance, there are things people should not do. There is a limit to what government can do, even at the local government area. How can we increase the figures right there in terms of prevention? What do the people need to know and do so that we can prevent diseases more than we are doing currently?
It's a very good question. For example, some of the technical areas under prevention relate to even the legal instruments, like the laws that we have for public health. One of the major jumps that Nigeria made in terms of the gaps in the legal instruments was to sign into law the acts that established the NCDC. Now, there are other laws that are waiting presidential assent. For example, I know that the Public Health Emergency Bill, the Port Health Services Bill, and things where the work on those bills were concluded with the last National Assembly, and they are waiting presidential assent. So I think these and other laws, once assented to by the president, will actually give us a significant jump in our scores under legal instruments. But it's not just national laws. We also need more states to amend their own public health laws in alignment or in response to the assessment of state public health laws that have been done, and to also develop their own health security plans. We have problems with interventions to prevent the emergence of multi-drug resistant organisms. So when the ongoing process to develop the next national action plan on national antimicrobial resistance plan is concluded and implemented as proposed, we will have a significant jump in that area. And if I give another example, in that area, we've got the need to prevent zoonotic diseases. we scored really badly there because we are not doing very well on sanitary animal production practices. And I'm sure I don't need to say too much about that. If people
which is really the concern. My apologies, Dr. Adetifa. Which is really the concern? Because the question actually I'm asking is, the government's work is cut out for government, but what the people need to do is of concern, which raises the question of the fears of a resurgence of polio. Are these issues you raised anywhere connected? How can we ensure that it doesn't get any worse than it already is?
So we scored lower than we should, for example, in the area of vaccination coverage, which speaks to what you have just said about polio. Okay, the circulation and the emergence of mutant polio viruses is entirely about vaccination coverage. Okay, the ongoing diphtheria outbreak is about vaccination coverage. Outbreaks that we see of yellow fever, of measles, are all about vaccination coverage. The country is doing very well, actually, in terms of national vaccine access and delivery. What we need people to do is to now increasingly make use of all of the opportunities that government has provided at all levels to really get vaccinated. That will change things dramatically, not just for the purpose of scoring, but even for protecting our health, reducing outbreaks, reducing suffering, and reducing deaths.
It really is a concern, but I'm pretty sure that it's something you have your hands on, and you and your team are doing wonderfully at it. Unfortunately, we're out of time now. Dr. Adetifa, I would have loved to continue this conversation, but thank you for your time this morning, and all the best to you. Dr. Ifedayo Adetifa is Director General, Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Thank you again for what you do, and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we're back right after now to talk about something else, which is, I consider, very important. Today is World Humanitarian Day. That's up next. Do stay with us. Around the world today, more and more people are being pushed deeper into humanitarian crisis due to new and ongoing conflicts and consequences of various issues, including climate and ecological emergency. Now, if those in need of humanitarian assistance form the country, believe me, it will probably be the third largest in the world. And this suffering non-country is growing at an exponential rate of about 30% since 2022. Now, More than ever before, people in crisis are in need of humanitarian support. The federal government of Nigeria, for instance, on Friday, announced that as of June 2023, a total of 3.6 million people were displaced in the northeast, northwest, and north-central regions of Nigeria. We could go on and on with several other data from the UNHCR and the rest of them. But, the current year has also witnessed the kidnapping of 5 aid workers in the northeast, alongside similar incidents from various corners of our nation. Not very pleasant to hear, but that's our reality. Let's have a conversation around World Humanitarian Day 2023. And the theme is, It Takes a Village. 2 gentlemen join us this morning. Olushola Tejosho is Communication Coordinator for Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
And we also have Emmanuel Osemeka, who is Country Director, Social Welfare Network Initiative in our Abuja studio. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, do we say, Mr. Tejosho, do we say Happy World Humanitarian Day? Yeah, but while we are celebrating or marking the day, the issues aren't funny. The data is staggering. UNHCR that I cited, for instance, their operating data says a staggering 3,578,966 internally displaced persons were recorded as of June this year in the northeast, northwest, and north central regions of the country. What that means is that families, vulnerable and resilient, find themselves navigating dire consequences. Well, it's not the same thing in Lagos, but it's not to say that Lagos is having it any less, right?
Well, so interesting, but unfortunately, that is the reality. And we must just continue to do the very best we can to ensure that we navigate ourselves out of this challenge. But for Lagos, based on your question, yes, Lagos is not really experiencing such, but it doesn't mean that we are not having displaced people in Lagos as well. Because generally, when we talk about people being displaced, it majorly comes from 2 angles. Conflict-driven displacement, that is what we are having in the northeastern part of Nigeria and also the north central, as well as northwest, like you said, based on your data. The other angle to it is 2 natural disasters, like flood, like fire, and other things. These are issues that can also trigger displacement that will cause people to be away from their abode. For Lagos, like you also know, last year we had some issue of flood, which also affected some people. But like we all know that to an extent, Lagos has capacity to respond to emergency. And at the moment, I think there are about 2 resettlement centers put together by Lagos State government with LASEMA, one at Govt and one at Ikorodu. So whenever we have such issues, these are places where they take people to, for them to be able to at least pull their head for some time before they can be able to look for a way to reunite themselves back to their family. So, but it's not so much, but we have a level of displacement as well, also in Lagos.
So let me put this to you, and this is just an instance before I go to Mr. Osemeka in Abuja studio. Help people understand, what things, if it's not war, it is something else. Getting people to leave certain localities is usually a problem. How do you handle that? I give the example, for instance, of the refuse dump at Olusosun. There are people living so closely to the place. And so naturally it raises the question in my own mind, look, how are people dealing with that? So in terms of such situations, how do you get people to move away from places that are not safe for them in the name of humanitarian aid?
Well, it's dicey, but that is the reality. People decide to stay back in their ancestral community for diverse reasons. Apart from Olusosun, even in some interior part of the country, we've seen a whole lot. We have cases whereby a whole community will be flooded, people have no place to sleep, and yet they are not even ready to leave the place. They will tell you, my father was buried there, my grandfather was buried there, I cannot live here. So it boils down to orientation and to mindset. So, and it's always very difficult. But for us, as humanitarian aid worker, you can't force people to leave. But the best we can do is to go to communities and build their resilience. Okay. And that's part of what we do as Red Cross. Go to communities, build their resilience, and improve their capacity on how they can be able to respond to issues, to disaster, and how they can be able to mitigate such occurrences. Okay.
Mr. Semeka, this whole idea of Humanitarian Day, World Humanitarian Day, started far back enough when due to that bombing in Iraq, which we all know about. But since 2016, the Aid Workers Security Database had recorded the tragic loss of 37 aid workers and 24 wounded, 34 kidnapped in the northeast of Nigeria alone. I'm almost certain that this is not just peculiar to the northeast. We'll have pockets of areas like that where aid workers, one can say they are an endangered species. How would you say we are working to either protect them or even offer them the correct intervention per time?
Okay, thank you very much, so basically, the reality is that the humanitarian aid worker is not immune, from the insecurity itself. As much as humanitarian aid is, geared towards assisting people and making sure that you reduce their level of suffering as a result of conflict-induced or natural disaster, just like my friend, from Nigerian Red Cross, clearly enumerated, with you in Abuja, in Lagos studios. The truth is, humanitarian workers are also come, across to the aggressors. If you use a case in point, for example, the Boko Haram activities in the northeast. We've had our own fair share of experience, with regards to being victims ourselves. We lost one of our drivers. He was kidnapped by the Boko Haram 3 years ago, of course, with our vehicle. And till today, we've not found him. And so that's one direct hit on us. We've come across several, ambushes, bomb blasts left and right. But so we've just escaped by the grace of God, by the mercies of God, and of course by the expertise of our military, who have always come to our aid, when such happens. So the reality is that the humanitarian aid workers who risk their lives to venture into trouble zones or difficult terrains to provide the much needed food assistance or provide water or provide any protection related activities for conflict related or victims of insurgency or victims of natural disasters also come, they also expose themselves to the vagaries of the risks there. So the aid workers are not immune. They are part and parcel of the situation and the challenges that goes with it. So that's why today is set aside to celebrate.
So you would say then that providing humanitarian services in Nigeria is not even safe for those who want to rescue others from lack of safety?
Well, the reality is that nobody is safe. I mean, whether you're providing humanitarian aid in Afghanistan or Libya or Syria or Ukraine or Nigeria, anywhere you are as a humanitarian aid worker, you are equally exposed to the vagaries of that environment or that situation. The difference is that there are safety measures, there are rules of engagement which you must adhere to. But sometimes, you obey the rules, but the reality is that if you are in a conflict environment and there are people you need to support, even if you are operating within a certified camp environment, it does not preclude, the non-state actors from invading that locality. We've had several of that, in Syria, in Afghanistan, as much as, we've also had that in Goza, in Limankara, in Madagali, in Ngoshe, Pulka. You have that all across. So, or even talk about in Benue State or in Plateau State. So the reality is that the non-state actors have no limit to where and how and when they will strike. Our prayer and our desire is that most often there are preparations that are made, and of course the military or security forces create some form of buffer, but sometimes those buffers are broken down, and if you have a battalion to protect a particular camp and you have more than 1,000 aggressors coming, I do not see how and how easy it will be for just this single battalion to ward off that attack. So that's what exactly we're talking about. So that's why you see that sometimes aid workers are kidnapped, and sometimes aid workers are kidnapped on transit, because you move from one locality to the other. Sometimes you go through very difficult terrain, and in going through those difficult terrain, you are also exposed to all kinds of things. So whether you are in armored vehicle or you are not in armored vehicle, there are bombs or IEDs planted on the roads which can explode and kill, or explode and create some sort of a blockade. And of course, by that, the idea would be for them to block, then come out from their hiding and attack and carry as many people as possible for ransom. Yeah.
Very interesting situations right there. I don't even know how to go about this. Let me ask you, Mr. Tejusho. So data from the UN indicates, for instance, that about 25 million people are facing hunger crisis, given the insecurity, climate change, and flood. So what is the Red Cross doing or plans to do to ameliorate this situation?
Okay, well, that's the data received from United Nations. But as it is, Red Cross is, we are auxiliary to government, and based on this role as empowered by the Act of Red Cross 1960, we are doing the best we can to ensure that we alleviate the suffering of the most vulnerable. But just as you know, that basically Red Cross will depend on donors' fund, will depend on donation from spirited individuals, from corporate organizations, and from general public to be able to carry out our core mandate. So for us, we have a plan. We already have our operation in place in order for us to be able to look at how we can be able to do the very best we can to reduce this figure and ensure that we give hope to these vulnerable people. So, and this is another privilege for us to also call on individuals to assist and look at how they can be able to be part of what Red Cross is doing, because the work is enormous. And the government alone cannot really do it. And so for us as Red Cross, we are depending on donors from individuals to also be able to. So
you consider, funding a significant issue?
Yes, funding is key to our operation. It's key to this in the sense that, one, we have a manpower, our membership is local based. We have our members spread across the 774 local governments of Nigeria, the 30 states of the Federation and FCT. So to carry out some of these activities of us, we need funding, we need to be able to carry out aid assistance, medical assistance, and also be able to navigate through the security concerns, logistical complexities, and the likes. So funding is the key, is very, very key, and it's partnership with donors, and also be able to look at how our movement partners can also support us as well.
Well, Mr. Semeka, do you consider funding as significant as well given the issues that you have raised?
Humanitarian response is a very, very expensive venture. So you take a cursory look at the humanitarian activities across the globe. Sometime in 2018, Nigeria had a humanitarian response, national humanitarian response call for about $2.2 billion. And at the time, we were dealing with almost 6-point-something million displaced people, both directly and indirectly. That number has reduced significantly as a result of the successes recorded by our military in the Northeast, for example. But of course, a lot of these activities, a lot of the displacement have shifted to some of the states in the North Central region, and of course, further down. But today we have a call for about $1.2 billion or $1.6 billion. But so far, this is August, the funds raised so far for the Nigerian humanitarian response is in the neighborhood of about 400 million, which is a far cry from where, the journey. What is the reason? The reason is because there are so many humanitarian activities going on across the globe. So one in case in point is the issue of the Ukraine and Russia war. You have issues in Afghanistan, you have issues in Syria, you have issues in Turkey. You have fire going on, wildfire in Canada, which is affecting America as well. And they're all, focusing most of their funding, in taking care of themselves. And of course, the major concern for the world funders, who are also funders of the Nigerian humanitarian response, major funders of the Nigerian humanitarian response, is focused on Ukraine. Because, who are the funders? You're talking about US, UK, France, New Zealand, China, and of course a lot of the Scandinavian countries, they bring their funding here and there. The biggest funders are the US and the UK through the USAID, International Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, which is the biggest humanitarian organization in the world. It has always been my belief as a national player, that Nigeria would have copied the structure of the US or at least the UK, because that is where we, take a lot of our style, our strategies from. In the US, you have the Federal Emergency Management Agency that is squarely focused on disaster management, and not displacement management. While the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, and of course, a lot of other humanitarian organizations are focused in displacement management when necessary, and they provide those kinds of aids. So the first responder is basically FEMA. But in Nigeria, we have the National Emergency Management Agency that was created specifically for disaster management, just like FEMA in America. But unfortunately, for political reasons or what have you, we have also pushed our NEMA to begin to handle humanitarian response and displacement management, which they were not cut out to in the first place. And of course, you now have, in addition, the High Commission for Refugees and Migrants, and of course included IDPs as well. Then in addition to that, we've created the Ministry of Humanitarian Response. All of this, when you take a look at their overhead costs, I've just mentioned 3, but there are several others. If you take a look at their overhead cost, it's humongous. And if you take a chunk of that, you'll be able to provide some level of support and, of course, assistance to displaced people or support disaster activities in one way or the other. So for me, duplication of activities is one of the major challenges we're having, and those fundings can go to better use. So, for example, we have the Nigerian Red Cross, which can be a similitude of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Society, or we can create our own similitude of USAID. Not exactly that, but my understanding is that private sector-driven humanitarian response or displacement management augurs well for the society, saves you costs, then the government can sit back and do what you call monitoring and evaluation, and punish people where they err. But the reverse is the case, where the government agency is the one responsible for the responses. So the question I and a few others ask is, when the government fails or misappropriates or mismanages, who punishes the government?
That's a million dollar question right there, Mr. Simeka. But, you know, a quick one that I want to ask you, you know, is, I mean, talking about, you know, your national spread and all, how up front and center would you say governments, federal, state, or local, put humanitarian issues on their to-do list?
Okay, so the simple answer to that is that the government across level, from federal, state, and local government, of course, for me, the local government appears not to be existing, is that they look at the humanitarian response as a political tool. So they respond to it using their various photo ops and all that. So, for example, you see a governor who has myriads of issues and myriads of challenges, wake up in the morning, or maybe take out 3 or 4, maybe take out a week, and is busy going around distributing rice, beans, and oil to communities. If it is not for political expedience, why would the governor do that when the local government is available? Besides even the local government, there are several NGOs or organizations that you can use. Because why I emphasize the NGOs is that the NGOs are there to support government. But the government in Nigeria have sort of taken over that responsibility from the NGOs and making it very difficult for the NGOs to, you know, respond appropriately. And I believe that, just like the point I made earlier, we have seasoned, you know, organizations, philanthropic and grant-making organizations in Nigeria. One of them is the Chiwaya Danjuma Foundation, that for over 10 years have provided funding and capacity development to Nigerian organizations and made grants to them to support in the areas of health, education, humanitarian response, including the IDP's activities. And this is an organization that has serious accountability framework that when the government channels all the funds through them, they can now monitor and ask them questions where necessary if they misappropriate or if they do wrong. But today, the government sees humanitarian response as a political tool, and they use it for vote mobilization and what have you. So the reality is, until we begin to see humanitarian response as pure assistance to ameliorate and reduce the sufferings of victims of either conflict-affected areas or natural disaster-prone regions, we are still playing. The 5 trailer loads of rice sent to each state, I am still wondering how they are going to distribute it. Because, for example, my organization in the past how many years have been attending to taking care of 174,000 households in 4 local governments in the Northeast. And on a monthly basis, we do on the average of 50 or 60 trucks. And it's still not enough. Yet you are doing 5 trucks to a state. It's still very laughable to me, and we're watching with keen interest.
Well, again, as you said, we're watching. Let me ask you, Mr. Tejosho. Now, this year's theme of for the World Humanitarian Day is no matter what. And I also know that the United Nations SDG goals, the theme is leave no one behind. Are they in any way connected to you?
Yes. They are connected. Okay. For the theme of this year, International Humanitarian Day, no matter what, no matter the challenges, no matter the threats, no matter the difficulties, we will continue to provide a humanitarian service. Then, in line with one of the goals of SDG, that is leave no one behind. So based on what I just analyzed, no matter what, no matter the challenges, no matter the threat, no matter the difficulty, we will leave no one behind. We will ensure that everybody is carried along and every vulnerable people are attended to.
Okay. Let's use the example of Lagos. I mean, he spoke to it the other time, what state governments do. What's been the response for you from especially the local governments? There are 20 officially in Lagos and 37 LCDAs. what's been the relationship? How's it been for you navigating in spite of the challenges, as you put it? What if you maybe want to cite? You may want to cite an example of a peculiar situation, humanitarian situation in Lagos, and how the difficulty you're encountering and how you are able to navigate.
Okay, well, for us, like I said earlier on, humanitarian service is like a tripod. Conflict-driven displacement, health emergencies, and natural disasters. But for us in Lagos, what we've been having majorly is the area of health emergencies. And that's where we've been, for Nigerian Red Cross, in other part of Nigeria, yes, we've been involved in other activities. But for us in Lagos, because of the peculiarity of Lagos, we've been actively involved in the health emergencies. And that's the reason why we've been actively involved in the issue of RI, with immunization for diphtheria, for measles. When COVID came, the same thing. When Ebola came, the same thing. So like I said earlier on, to answer your question, we have Red Cross across all the 20 local governments. We call it division for us in Red Cross. And in order for us to be able to implement all these operations, our divisional secretaries at those levels, those local governments, work directly with the MOH at those local governments. We just finished our intervention on diphtheria about 2 weeks ago in 9 local governments, and it was a fantastic relationship. So on health-related issue, we work directly with the MOH at the local level, also with the health educators at the local level. And this is based on our relationship with the State Primary Health Care Board of Lagos State. So as far as relationship is concerned, it's very good, and they've always been very, very cooperating because they've been seeing us as partners. And that is exactly what we've been doing over the time. So it's been very, very good, and though it can be better, but so far, so good. They've been very, very cooperative and supportive.
Mr. Semeka, let's close with this question. So the ministers are going to get into the saddle from Monday, particularly the humanitarian services and humanitarian deliverables of Nigeria that you spoke to. Do you see any hope in sight, any specific agenda you want to give to the minister as he comes in?
Well, the needs are quite humongous, honestly. The minister designate for the humanitarian affairs has her background in health, primary health care. So one way or the other, I believe she's going to have a lot of input and a lot of understanding, and most probably I believe she will be able to push for improvement in the health services, because in the last 8 years, the government sort of dropped the ball a little bit. And that's why, like you mentioned in your last conversation with the DG of this Center for Disease Control, we were, what do you call it, we were polio free, but we're back on the saddle again. Routine immunization, dropped significantly. All kinds of stuff has happened, which we will not have the time to explain. But most importantly today, which I believe that the humanitarian minister should look at, we do not want to see a situation where cash distribution happens without accountability. It is very important that every response comes with serious and, verifiable measures for accountability. It must be impact-driven.
Okay.
It must, embody the 7 principles of humanitarian response.
Okay.
One is humanity, neutrality, independence, unity, and versatility. It's important that those principles are embedded in every response, be it from government or from the private organization.
Okay, then.
So for us, I want to push that, since she in Calabar was able to work with civil societies properly, she should be able to bring on the table, or to the table, humanitarian NGOs to prick their capacity for better and improved service delivery.
to the people. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Osemeka, for that one, and we can only wait and hope that, you know, all of these aspirations are met and we have a more humane nation. Emmanuel Osemeka, Country Director, Social Welfare Network Initiative, thank you so much for your time this morning, as well as Olushola Tejocho, who is Communication Coordinator for Lagos. Thank you again for your time this morning.
Welcome.
Now, another concerning conversation is going to happen when we return from this break. Please stay with us.
I feel like a star shining in the middle of the night, shining so bright in a world so dark. You fill me with your love. You keep me shining every time I hear you say I love you. Every time you say I love you. Connecting heaven. It's your right to shine. Get this love and hope divine. We keeping it open. Connect and come together and feel this love.
Life is not always sugar and cream. You'll never know what's coming your way. Just when you think it's settling, there's always something that's choking your day. Doesn't matter what we go through, I will always be there for you. Every day, every night, 365 days, I will always be there just like you'll be there for me.
In the middle of the night, shining so bright in a world so dark. You fill me with your love. It's mama, mama, only I'm Julie Merano. You keep me shining every time I hear you say I love you. Every time you say I love you. Connecting to love in this lifetime. 65 days that we will shine. In the hate that we design. We can push forward or stay and rewind. Loving make me shine. No denying. Hold you down forever. Together we flying. Don't let nobody kill your dream. As the journey can be tough, moving on street.
So let's talk about it. Suicide, we understand, is a major global health concern that's a substantial contributor to mortality worldwide. Let's just go into the conversation this morning. Miracle Ihoma is with us this morning. He's a clinical psychologist. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, sir. It's good to be here.
We understand that approximately 79% of deaths occur in developing countries due to suicide. One person is estimated to commit suicide every 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Why so bad? 40 seconds, that's less than a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the second leading cause of death, you know, after accidental deaths.
What's sudden? I mean, it sounds sudden to me because even though, yeah, I mean, these things have been happening, but in our climate, to hear that people jump into the lagoon, people take, you know, inhale poisonous stuff, people just take anything just to get themselves. What exactly is happening?
Yeah, just like I said, it's the second leading cause of death, and you know, the single most important risk for suicide is a previous attempt, because suicide has, say, there are three levels of suicide. So there is suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. There is suicidal attempt, and then there's suicidal completion. So not everybody, for instance, who has thought about suicide has attempted suicide. And not everybody who has attempted suicide has completed the act of suicide. So there are a lot of people who, you know, start by thinking about it. That's where it starts from, just thinking about the idea of suicide.
What informs that thinking? That's the question.
Now, what informs the thinking is predominantly mental health conditions. So let's take an example with depression, for instance. So when somebody is depressed, typical symptoms would include things like loss of pleasure in previously pleasurable or enjoyable events. So the person loses interest in things that used to interest them. The person experiences low mood. So they want to stay in bed all day most times. It affects their eating behavior. So all of these things can now climax into thoughts of taking their own lives. Wow. Yeah, because prior to suicide or preceding suicide is hopelessness. Because someone has to get to a place where they feel like there is no more hope. I can't see anywhere further than I am right now. I can't see any other option, because what is typical to people, for instance, who are suicidal is what is called a dichotomous mindset. A dichotomous mindset is a mindset that thinks only in two dimensions, this or that, black or white. In real life example, it's either I get married to this person or I don't get married at all.
This particular person.
This particular person. So that's why you would hear people commit suicide when a partner breaks up with them, because I can't see myself getting married to any other person if not this person. I don't care if there are other people out there. It's this person I must get married to.
We had a story over in the course of the week of some individual who decided to commit suicide simply because there was the marriage crashed or something. Okay. So I was going to ask a question, about whether or not suicide attempts or suicidal thoughts have to do with economic conditions or situations that someone finds himself. This particular individual that I just talked about, we understand this fellow is supposed to be very, very wealthy. Spent a lot of money on the marriage, on the wedding, and then the marriage, and then, before what is happening, the marriage is crashing and the fellow is having suicidal thoughts. So it doesn't have anything to do with economic condition, does it?
Doesn't.
Not at all, or not much?
Not necessarily, because it's just like saying, now there are risk factors. So, for instance, there is a higher rate of suicide in developing countries than developed countries.
Okay. Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Except that, for developing countries, a lot of suicide are not reported. But even with reported suicide, developing countries have a higher percentage of suicides than developed countries. Nigeria, for instance, is ranked maybe 15th highest suicidal nation in the world. So Africa is, I think about the highest in terms of continent. So, economic factors could be a risk factor to somebody actually going ahead to commit suicide. So it can affect, but that's not the only reason, or that's not the only thing that can affect. Right? Other things, there can be other risk factors as well.
Okay.
For instance, things like people's coping mechanisms can affect how they are able, to deal with suicidal thoughts and things like that.
Coping mechanisms due to some previous shocks or occurrences in their lives, right?
Coping mechanisms due to how they have been trained, or how they have trained themselves to interpret situations.
In growing up.
In growing up.
So essentially you're saying it is not something that just suddenly happens.
No, it's not something.
It's a build-up over decades.
Yes. Yes, it's a build-up over time. One of the times I was here in the show, I talked about a lady who committed suicide because she failed JAMB. Now, for her, just like I said, people who are suicidal think in dichotomous manner. It's this or that. So it's either I pass this JAMB or I die. That's it for her.
This thing that you just said now brings back some crazy memories. There are many people watching us now who were told that if you don't have maths, if you fail maths in your life, you are done for.
Yeah.
If you identify with that, you can send us a mail. I mean, look, if I do not pass maths, I cannot succeed in this life. So if that kind of person, for instance, failed mathematics in the 80s or in the 90s, the person is
seen as a failure.
Will see himself or herself as a failure simply because of what he or she has been told.
Yeah.
So this is what happens, right?
Yeah.
And this is the build-up.
Yeah.
That you're talking about.
For instance, I wasn't good in maths, so I'm a typical example of somebody who didn't pass maths. In fact, just why that story of the lady who committed suicide because she failed JAMB is very relatable to me, is because I didn't just fail JAMB. I wrote JAMB 3 times, but then I failed O-level 4 times. So I wrote WAEC, I failed. I wrote NECO, I failed. I wrote GC, I failed. It was the 4th the second GC I wrote, which was the fourth O-level exam, that I now passed. And I started writing JAMB. First time I failed, second time I failed. So it was the third time I passed. So in all of those times, I didn't think about suicide. Yes,
why didn't you think about suicide?
Because the way I cope with difficulties and failures is different from the way that lady has been built to cope with it. Suicide never crossed my mind. What crossed my mind was, okay, so what is exactly the problem? How can I do better in my next exam? You know, that was what was on my mind at the time. So how we have been trained to deal with failures, how we have been trained to deal with difficulties, you know, could actually decide the prognosis of how well we are able to deal with difficult situations or things like suicide or suicidal thoughts, you know, when they come. So people who have not been trained to develop resilience, for instance.
Or to even believe in themselves.
To believe in themselves, who have poor self-esteem. You know, they can have, you know, very poor prognosis of, you know, getting those suicidal thoughts and ultimately attempting to.
So, but that's not to say that it's a hopeless situation for them, is it?
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. But somebody who's suicidal doesn't think that way.
Oh.
Yeah, it is not thinking. If to him is, like I said, preceding suicide is hopelessness, and preceding hopelessness is cluelessness. So someone has to be clueless before they become hopeless.
Pause. Let's take it back. Where does it start from? You've talked about, growing up.
Yes.
You mentioned depression the other time. Which of these situations you've talked about, hopelessness, cluelessness, how does it start for someone who is perhaps in a particular stage now to quickly decode himself and call for help?
Okay. So preceding suicide is hopelessness, and preceding hopelessness is cluelessness. So you have to get to a point where you are clueless before you become hopeless. Cluelessness is, I don't know what else to do. That is why one of the vocabularies you must embrace is a vocabulary called options. You must always have options. It cannot always be this or that. There are other options. So it's not, I either go to this university or I'm not going to university at all. What other universities can I go? It shouldn't be, it's either I become a billionaire or I'm nothing. No. You can become a millionaire, for instance. You know, there are other options that you must embrace. So you must always ask yourself, what are the other options that exist in this situation apart from this option that I might not be able to get at this time? That is it. Then after cluelessness is hopelessness, because if you are clueless, then you become hopeless because you feel that there is no hope for you, you know, other than what you have lost or what you don't have, right? And when you become hopeless, then of course.
So where does depression come in?
Yeah, so depression is what actually constitutes, because the ultimate height of depression is hopelessness. Where you feel like, okay, there is no hope, there is nothing left for me to do, and there is nothing left for me here. So the best option is for me to kill myself. Now, this is how a suicidal person thinks. This is psychology of suicide. The psychology of suicide is what a suicidal person wants is to end the pain they are feeling at this time. It's not like they are bad people. It's not like, oh, they want to cause people around them pain. The pain they are feeling is legitimate, right? They are feeling so much pain. I told, a group of people that if you want to know how a depressed person feels, somebody who's dealing with major depression, I said, have you ever been sad at any point in your life? They said, yes, they have been sad. I said, multiply that sadness by 100. That is how somebody who's dealing with major depression is feeling at the time. So imagine in that state where you were feeling some sort of sadness and then multiplying that by 100. How would you be feeling, in that state? That's how somebody who is suicidal is thinking, or that's how they are feeling, right? So what they want to do is to end that pain, that emotional pain that they are feeling. So they feel that if I end my life, then I've ended this pain. Except that what I tell anybody suicidal is, and anybody who's listening to me, is, have you ever been dead before? I said, no, they have never been dead. I said, me too, I've never been dead. So I really don't know what it means like to be dead. I really don't know what happens on the other side of life, right? Or death. So is there any guarantee that killing yourself will actually end this pain that you're feeling? In the real sense of it. Like,
or it could get worse.
Yeah, he said that, like, okay, there is no guarantee. I said, yeah, I can't give you any guarantee because I don't know if it will actually do it. But I said, okay, there is something that I know about. There's something I'm sure about, which is seeking help, which is therapy. I've seen people who were dealing with suicidal thoughts, who were dealing with depression, who were dealing with bipolar disorder, who were dealing with borderline personality disorder, who had become better and, dealt with this suicidal ideation, the suicidal thoughts that they are having. Now, that's a guaranteed way. Now, two of these ways, are going in the same direction. They have the same end in mind, except that one is not certain and one is. So killing yourself is not certain, right? But if you go through therapy, it has some level of certainty because it's something that we are seeing in this reality that we live in.
No, if you feel that you need to talk to someone, there is that helpline that has been scrolling on the screen as Dr. Homa has been speaking, because we shouldn't do life alone. No one should do life alone. I've talked about this. Interestingly, I mean, it's something, we'll come to that conversation now. You shouldn't do life alone. You shouldn't ever be so sad and depressed as to say there is no other way. We've had cases of people who lock themselves up in rooms, Dr. Homa, who lock themselves away, who lock themselves in a car, who just do some rash things. Victims of rape, for instance, victims of job loss, victims of robbery, and all those things. Even though, as you said, there are things that one could have come up with from way back in time, isn't it likely that some of these things could actually be triggered by sudden action or sudden trauma?
Yeah. Traumatic events, for instance, it could trigger suicidal thoughts. So when somebody, for instance, loses a relationship, when they, are raped or abused and things like that, it could actually trigger suicidal thoughts, right? But all the same, it still goes back to how much resilience and how much, what coping mechanisms that you are employing, whether you're employing a positive or a negative coping mechanism at the time to deal with that situation. Because what I tell people is, no matter what it is you are going through or you have gone through, there are a lot of other people who are going through it, who have gone through it, who did not take their life, who did not consider suicide. They look for other ways to deal with that particular issue that you are going through. So it's just a change and a tilt in the way you're saying it.
We'll get to that in a moment, but let me just ask this. We're a very religious country. Very, very religious people. We go to church, we go to mosque, we do a lot of meditating and all those things. How helpful are those interventions, if I can use that word?
Yeah. Now, there are positives and there are negatives to it. Okay. Right, so I'll start with the positive or negative. Which one should I start with?
Whichever one.
Okay, let me start with the positive. Right, so the positive to that is that research has shown that there's a positive correlation between faith and how people are able to deal with difficult situations.
So faith and mental health?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So when people believe that there is a higher power somewhere who's in charge of their lives, they tend to go through issues or difficulties better than people who do not believe in that higher power. Because if I believe in a higher power, then I believe that, okay, somebody's watching over me, and whatever it is I'm going through, I'll most likely come out victorious. But if I don't believe in a higher power, and I believe that, okay, I am the sole decider of whatever happens in my life, then if this is what my life can produce, then there's really no hope of what to come after this.
So that you said data backs this up?
Data backs this up. Okay. So it's research proven that faith actually has a positive correlation with how much we are able to deal with mental health issues and conditions. Okay. But the negative side to it is that because of, especially in a continent like Africa, where we cannot really decipher and put a clear difference between religion and science. We mix them both, and then we, for instance, now begin to attribute things that are scientific to religion. So somebody, for instance, is dealing with depression, or somebody is dealing with schizophrenia, and we say, oh, the person is being pursued from the village. And we say, oh, this person is, the witches and wizards are really dealing with this guy. So instead of us to, because we have that mindset, instead of us to take him to a psychiatric hospital or to a mental health specialist, we take him to church or to mosque or to a spiritual home. And then most times their situation get worse, right? So that's where the mix comes in. So that's the positive and negative sides to religion.
Okay, something came to my mind to ask you now. Okay, yes, you said data backs faith.
Yeah.
And there's a data proof to prove correlation between faith and mental health.
Yes.
You use the word faith, not religion.
Yes.
Why? Because it will seem to be a little different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Faith is belief, right? Believe in a super or higher power. That's what faith is. So it's not just practicing religion.
So religion is the practice.
It's a practice.
Okay.
Faith is belief. When you believe that there is somebody, there is a superpower somewhere, whatever that is for you, who controls your life.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually, gives you more
a measure of
momentum.
hope.
Yes.
Now, to some solutions now. We have just about 5 minutes. Someone now listening to you and watching us, this program right now, what are you willing to tell the fellow who may be suicidal in his head, who has been groomed in a particular way up until this moment that the suicidal thoughts are only increasing in percentage? What would you want to tell the fellow right now?
Yes. So I'll start with what I said earlier. I know what you're trying to deal with. I know that you are trying to achieve. I know what you're trying to achieve with the suicidal thoughts that you're having. You think that killing yourself at this time would end the pain, the emotional pain and trauma that you are feeling. Except that you're not guaranteed it will. But like I said, I know a more guaranteed and a more assured way of dealing with that emotional pain. And it is called therapy. Through therapy, you can deal with that emotional pain and feel better than you are feeling right now. We've seen people get better over time with therapy, and your case would not be an exception. So if you are dealing with those thoughts, please seek help. Seek help, right? It is very important. Don't be too shy not to seek help. Don't be too timid not to seek help. Reach out and seek help because help is available. When you have problems with your car, you call your mechanic. When you have problems with your physical health, you call your doctor. When you have problems with your clothing, you call your fashion designer. When you have problems with your mental health, you shouldn't be shy to look for necessary help with people who have been certified, trained to help you with that problem. So seek help today because help is available. This is me sending out love and light to you and telling you that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. So don't give up.
This last word, there's this saying in one of the religious, faiths that faith comes by hearing. You've only spoken to this fellow just once, who is listening to you and watching you right now. Yeah. But they've been listening to this thing for donkey years, for decades. How will what you just said now in maybe 1 or 2 minutes change what they've been listening to or hearing for about the past 10 years or more? I ask that because, it's become some sort of a stronghold for them. So getting past that, believing anything different from what the people they respected all their lives have told them might be a little difficult to change.
Yeah. So what I've done now is to sow a seed, right? And hopefully in that seed is watered and grows and germinates, to become something like a tree and a forest, right? So these things, these words I've said to them should trigger them to then seek the help that is needed to dismantle that stronghold that has been built in their minds over time. Okay. So this is a starting point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Homa. Well, we put out that number the other time that you have seen, on the screen. That phone number asking for help. If you want to speak to someone else, and this number is right there. But if you think that, of course, that these are from different organizations, that have evolved, as a result of all of these. But you may want to send us an email if you are very, very adept at talking to Dr. Huoma, who has given you this seed. As you said it, our email address is also going to be right there on your Sunrise CTV at channelstv.com. Thank you so much this morning.
Thank you, sir.
For being a part of our conversation and helping to give perspectives to the issue of suicide. Now someone knows that it didn't just start. It's something they've been listening to for a lot of time in their lives. Now they need to change what they listen to so that they can get better at this. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
Miracle Ihuoma is a clinical psychologist. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. I am told that music has a way of calming the mind, especially dealing with mental health. That's a little bit of what we want to talk about when we return from this break for our home stretch. Do stay with us. Yes, that's our artist of the week. Some of you are probably wondering, who the holy is this? Well, ask mommy and daddy. They will tell you that that is Alex Okorigwe, popularly known as Alex O. Yes, that is him. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ayo. And by the way, you guys are doing a great job here. Beautiful job you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Helping the nation, helping the society. Kudos.
Well, the same way you also helped us in growing up.
Well,
my director said I should ask you what happened to all your hair. Let's start from there.
Oh my God. One thing that's constant in life is change.
Why did I think you would say that?
Because that's what the explanation.
But you know, well, there has been a lot of change between the 90s and now. There are for those who are wondering, well, he did that popular song, hit song, Celebrate. And we played it this morning, I think, by the way.
Okay.
Of course, come on. Now, that song, of course, became a global disco hit in the 90s. But between then and now, it's been quite a journey.
Yes.
Now, and the music scene has since changed.
Completely.
You know, back then we had a semblance of the music industry. A&R and all those things were there. Concerts were held by, you know, recording companies.
Yes.
You know, but how much of that has changed from between then and now? Let me also put this in before you know, respond. You know, back in your own day, you had to contest and compete with foreign music.
Yes.
It doesn't seem like the same these days, is it?
Yes, it's where do I start now? Now, the thing is, during that time, there were only very few record companies. And so that meant that there were only very few opportunities for the numerous talented musicians to have their way to come out and be heard. So you needed to compete. Each record company had an A&R, artist and repertoire department, and whatever you bring to them, they have to put it through the department. It's the department that will go through it and call the head of the sales manager, manage the sales department, and ask, can we sell this? What do you think this...
Will it sell?
Yes.
Will it not?
Work?
So we don't invest wrongly.
I'm telling you. So they needed to do all that. And for your music to be accepted, you know, to be released, you have to do a bit of homework. You have to do... Your lyrics have to make sense. Your melody lines, the way everything is all put together, the beat, everything has to make sense. In the middle of about 1,000 other tips that they have there, you know, and people are waiting.
So that's what they call music sampling at the time.
Yes, and you have to be lucky, you have to be hardworking, you have to be very creative, and you have to have God Almighty on your side. For you to be able to, you know, sometimes when I see some of my colleagues who were also trying that time, but not all of us were lucky. So I count ourselves to have been lucky, and we made good use of the opportunity.
Perhaps one other thing to add to that would be the role of musicianship. Because you had to know how to do something.
Yes,
I agree. Not just to you know, not just behind a keyboard.
If you had asked me the question you always ask at the end of every interview, what's your advice for the younger coming? Because I'm expecting that to come. So I prepared for you. Now, that's a part of the answer to what you just asked me right now. It's out of luck. If somebody puts a beat together, you hum something on top of it, and people like it, okay, you're just lucky. You have to know how to be able to put music together. You have to be able to know how to not only write a song, but how will it work with the beat, with the drums, with the keyboards, you understand? Before you even bring a producer in. Otherwise, you can only have a good stuff when there's a good creative producer who is in a very good creative mode to be able to interpret, you understand, what you just brought and how best it can be worked. If you meet a producer who is in a bad mood or who is at his low creative time of his life or whatever it is, it's not going to give you the best. But if you yourself are able to play the keyboard or the guitar, or at least a couple of things that can help you to put the music together. So when the producer comes, the rest of the job is a lot easier. You understand? For example, the Celebrate.
Yes.
Yeah, and some of those songs in that particular maxi single, I did more or less like 90%.
Oh wow!
And they now brought the big producer to who is more experienced than Lemmy Jackson. He now came and then put this, added this, and
no, back in back in those days, if Lemmy Jackson hasn't touched your album, I don't know where you're coming from.
Yes, he was the best we had.
Yeah.
You know, he's still good. He's still somewhere there working as well. So my complete answer would be, you have to know how to at least put music together.
Okay.
Yes, and be able to organize it in such a way that, yes, it's good music, then the producer comes and helps you. Otherwise, you make a hit and everybody's expecting another hit song. That was just luck.
So that's not hit. That's just luck.
Luck, yes. And then these days you have so many artists every day coming out.
So we'll get to that. But you know, what you just said now, I mean, it reminds me of something that we still do.
Okay.
I worked in the music library of a radio station.
Okay.
So as a point, I mean, these guys will come with loads of songs and say, that one, that's a hit song. That one, that's the hit. And I'll listen to the thing. Gosh, I couldn't think it for 10 seconds.
Yes.
And I had like three, you know, in the days of the CDs, I had like 10 to listen to. 10 albums, average 10 tracks each. I have to listen to all of them to be able to recommend, you know, this one is airworthy, this one is not airworthy, what we call, you know, in broadcasting, not to be broadcast. But you spoke about lyrics. Just now, that your song has to make sense.
Yes.
Compare that to now.
Yes. During our days, you know, you had to work hard. You had to be as creative as possible.
Well, they don't call it work hard anymore. They call it hustle now.
Okay. With the lyrics, it has to. Somebody listening to it, even without being put into a music form, somebody should be able to stop and say, what's that guy saying?
Saying?
Yes. It makes a lot of sense. When I put Celebrate together, okay, it's a birthday song. Yeah, people like birthday. Okay, happy birthday. Good. What about the beat? Yeah, it's the swing beat, everybody dancing. But I needed something that would make people laugh, to make people remember the song quickly after it's been played. They want to say and that's why I brought that pidgin rap into it. And that pidgin rap was the first rap in pidgin.
Wow.
Make we take some time to bubble and shuffle after all the hustle and bustle. Everybody wants to celebrate, but nobody wants talking age. If you just go ask that Lagos mama, say, how many years should they celebrate? She go holler and shout back at you, now waiting be your business. I fit celebrate 21 today, be say, the last time now 22, the next one fit be 20. So just bubble and shuffle and forget about my age. That's one funny thing that was going on around that time, because we had these girls from the campuses, you know, when you go,
they're always 16.
Yes.
They're always 16. Yes. One of them is in the studio now.
Good. And that caught on. That was one of the things that also helped the song. So it's more like...
But how do you think that plays out these days? Do you think we still give as much importance or preference to lyrics as we did before?
Yes. In music, everything has to come together. So now it's even much more so. And if you have, okay, look at it this way. At this particular time in this country, in fact, all over the world, if you want to say, people want to dance. Dance. You put some piece of music, somebody starts to shake. You understand? So if you have a very good beat that people can dance to, that the DJs can mix into what they're doing and keeping people on the dance floor, that's one. Then what you're saying, we'll be able to move it to the next step, you understand?
Yeah.
And then you start to talk about your videos and the promo and all that.
Very interesting.
So it all has to come together.
How do you feel about the fact that Nigerian music is in clubhouses all over the world today? Even in stadia, They play Nigerian musicians, young guys, in stadia all over the world. How does that make you feel?
Yes, I feel very happy. I feel like God decided to answer our prayers because those were the things we were fighting for during our days. We were trying, but you know what the problem was? Technology has changed everything. Yes. During our days, you were giving only about, let's say, 8 studio sessions of 8 hours each to do like 10 songs. That's a very short period of time for you to rush it. But these days, these guys own their own studios. Everybody owns their own, because every studio, you can have your studio on your laptop.
What does it even take to have a studio?
You can now take your time and work on your music
at
and make sure that it comes out the way you want it to come out.
But another thing that, haunted your generation, if I can, use the word, is that, foreign artists who are brought in willy-nilly. If there was ever going to be a big concert, it's the foreign artists that headlined.
Yes, and not only that, the radio stations were only playing, you understand, and that's what drove, only playing foreign artists.
Don't mind them.
Yes, and that's what drove some of us towards trying to sound like them, do what they were doing, and, so it was a whole lot of issues that needed to be addressed. So as time, in fact, during that time on radio, you have Music Nigeriana, RN2 and a couple of other stations.
They know themselves.
Yes. So where they play, then the rest of the time, it's all
foreign.
American, yes. So, but as time went on, and trust Nigerians, wherever they are, if they are enabled, if they are equipped, they will always excel. The music is sounding much better now. You know why? Because everybody has a studio.
Beside that is the fact that, look, today, I find it very, very amazing. I host events, and the elderly ones in their 50s and 60s, you say, okay, let's play old school for them. They say they want Nigerian music. Say,
yes, and also, I think if nobody has said it, let me say it, that what these younger guys are doing today came to be as a result of the fusion and experimentations and things that we
There is no doubt. There is no doubt about it. I will give it. That's one of the reasons you are here. The Felix Debatis, the Chris Okoties, and all those. Your generation. That cannot be remonstrated because, in fact, I think it was even your own generation that started, synchronizing music. Because back then, if you in the 80s, if you couldn't play hard, you couldn't. But I think it was the 90s that brought in this.
We actually, Michael Cree and Blackie, and I, for one, actually started sequencing music. Because I needed the beats to be as accurately quantized like the ones, you understand?
Exactly, that people are listening
and Lemmy Jackson, with all the experience he had.
There's a question I'm not going to ask you, which you want me to ask you, which is what's my advice? They're taking the advice, but I'm interested in the industry that we need to restore. So the few minutes that we have left, what have we missed in terms of having an established or well-established music industry that not just anybody can just saunter into? And so that, our music is all over the place, but do we have an industry to sustain it?
Yes, I think, I think that at some point, government has to come in and introduce some kind of regulation, maybe through the Ministry of Arts and Culture or something. They need to monitor what everybody is doing and see how they can advise, and also cut down on the straying, towards the whole lot of immoral things, the drugs, so it just spoils everything. And when you talk about the younger artists coming up, most of the times, it's all about funding. Some very good artists, who are very good, who can do it, and they don't get funding, they don't get... These days, it's like, if you have an uncle who is rich, and it's okay, they will call this person and put the money, but then maybe what he has is not good enough, but you push it and force it onto the public. If there
it catches on.
Yes, and sometimes it catches on, sometimes it doesn't, and a whole lot of money is wasted and nothing comes out of it. Some artists...
So do you think regulation will help?
I think so, even in the film industry as well.
Okay.
I think so.
Well, let me call this the first of many conversations we've had, because my my director is drumming into my ears that I need to pay some bills. But I have to thank you very much this morning for coming here and honoring us. Alex O.
And thank you very much for putting me in front of my fans, old and young. When you go and ask your mom and your dad, yes. But I'm working on some new stuff.
Oh, most certainly we can see that. I mean, the ones that we played, some of them are not old.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes,
so
yes.
we will find you out.
Thank you.
And just stay in touch. Most certainly.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this one, for instance, old or new? I guess we'll wait to see. Wow, that is Sunrise today. Thank you. We're closing that out with Alex O this morning. You do have yourself a wonderful, wonderful weekend and a beautiful week ahead. Don't forget, we have only one nation. Everything you do or don't do will make it better or worse. Have a wonderful rest of your time. Bye for now. I'm Ayo Makinde.
You people will not kill me with cough in this house. Let me call your mother.
Hello, honey.
Don't honey me anything. You better remain in the village. You forgot that you left children at home. All the children have been coughing. I've given them the drugs I know. Nothing is working. I'm tired. And you know I'm not a doctor. I don't know what
Honey,
to do.
calm down. Why not give them Neofilin cough syrup? Neofilin cough syrup is a cough linctus that puts an end to cough, cold, and catarrh. It's very fast in action. It has been tested and trusted for adults and children.
Okay, let me try. Did you say Neofilin?
Yes, Neofilin cough syrup.
Daddy, good morning. Daddy, I'm no more coughing.
Wow, so fast. Neofilin has done it.
Neofilin cough syrup is manufactured by Mopsin Pharmaceutical Limited, 47 Osolowe, Ajawa Estate, Oshodi, Lagos. If symptoms persist after 3 days, consult your doctor.
In the unwritten pages of extreme opulence lies a well-tailored art of contemporary living. Comes another breathtaking architectural masterpiece, a waterfront property masterfully created by a visionary team of world-renowned architects crowned with premium fittings. Leonardo is about to offend every iota of mediocrity with Fendi. The Leonardo now sells at a 25% price off. Forget every notion of luxury you've ever known. Own the Leonardo.
Stay connected to the world with Channels TV Podcast and get all the trending stories. Simply log on to channelstv.com. Click on podcast, select the program of your choice, and listen. Our podcast is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Tap the expertise you trust. Touch the stories that touch you. Anytime, anywhere.
up on Metrophile this week, 104-year-old